Okay guys, here we go with issue 2, and this is the first part we're going to be working on, and I'm going to show you which paints I've used to take this to then look like this. Right, to start with, I'll go through the washes I've got here. I've got the gloss oil stain wash, rust wash, blue grey wash and the dark grey wash. And then for the worn metal, Tamiya's X10. Okay, to start with, I used a combination of the blue and the grey dark washes to build up some shadowing in and around the areas of the piston. You just want a nice size brush so that you can get in and reach down the sides of the pistons and then around. I mean, obviously you can do the staining without the greeblies in, but for me it didn't really make any difference. So slowly, it's just a case of filling in. You don't have to be too precise at this stage, because obviously, as mentioned in the other video, the good thing to have to hand is tissue paper, where you can always dab and wipe back any excess. And then obviously go over the piston, which will bring out all the dark spots, and then when you go over with the tissue, we'll leave you with the dark areas and the lighter areas. So that's the stage with the grey. The dark grey wash, that is, not the blue grey wash. So to work through that, it's just a case of applying a mixture of the two and letting them sort of settle in till they get a nice hold. Now you can see I'm being a bit careless around the white, but obviously when I do the final weather on my R2 unit, it's going to have all the white discoloured, so as long as I get any sort of thick lines off, it's not really going to faze me. Okay, now I'm going in with the blue grey wash, exactly the same as I did with the dark grey wash. Just straight in around all the areas of the piston, making sure I get some on the actual piston itself, which gives, well, obviously the blue wash will give it a nice sort of reflective, steely, like cold blueness to it, and slightly dabbing to remove excess. Making sure it's all worked in down the sides, and then into all the creases of the piston itself. Same with the little buttons. Now obviously if you do want to make sure more paint stays on, you can just leave it on longer, allowing it to dry a bit more, thus when you come to take it off, less of it comes off on the tissue. Focus in there. And that's the blue grey wash stage. Okay, now adding a little bit more detail into the piston. and obviously the buttons as well, is I'm going in with gloss oil stain wash, just making sure exactly the same process, just building up the different layers and textures of the colour with the gloss oil stain. This obviously will replicate oil, and as I'm putting it on the piston, that's kind of what I want. So I'm only removing the little bits which are the flat surfaces that wouldn't hold the oil naturally, and then I'm leaving it in all the little crevices where obviously if it were to be leaking it would stay. That's another build up there, and obviously you can put it in around the pockets as well, just to get a bit extra built up. Okay, so now it's the stage of going in with the rust. Now I'm going to be building up some rust with the rust wash. Now I'm a little bit more precise with this because obviously I only want rust in certain areas of the piston. So I've applied it. Now I'm going to leave that to start to dry. And then I can go back to it to remove it, so I can work on another area while I'm waiting for it to dry a bit. So you build up as much rust as you want to put on, and then you can slowly remove it. Obviously the drier you wait for it to get, the more rust you're going to leave on it. But I find the sooner you take it off, it gives you a little bit more control over how much rust you have on, because taking it off quickly means you can build it up in layers rather than trying to get it all done in one hit. You can see there, the rust is slowly starting to build up. And that is pretty much the basis of the washing process for in and around the pistons. Now obviously if you want it darker, you just build up more layers. You want more rust, you just be a little bit more liberal with the brush. And now obviously to finish, you can go in with some weathering powder. Now I like to use quite a broad, soft, cheap brush to apply weathering powder, just because the bristles can hold the powder better than a modeller's brush. So little dab into the powder. Now if you do this when it's still a little bit wet, you can get it to adhere easier, should I say. So it's just a slow case of dabbing it in to the areas where you want to intensify the red oxidized rust colour. And you'll get exactly that effect. Obviously working with the rust wash, it works really well because it's just another variation of colour from the wash. Now same with the washes, you can dab this to remove a little bit Obviously, since it's a powder, you have to dab a bit harder to remove it. But doing so leaves you with a nice rusted texture, which is a consequence of obviously the texturing of the paper that you're dabbing with. And that's how you do that. Okay, so for the worn metal around the edges of any of the bodywork, I use a combination of X10 and also X11, which is gunmetal and chrome silver. You don't have to use both, it just depends on if you can be bothered to sit and add the extra layer of colouring to give it that little bit more detail. It's not strictly necessary. It does look fantastic either way, but here we go. A little bit on the brush, scraped off just so you've got a light amount, and then you work in some little scratches. I forgot to mention, obviously I am using quite a flat fanned taper cut brush to slowly apply a little bit at a time, obviously not overloading the brush, which would mean I'd have a huge paint splodge right on the edge. You can then use the flat of the brush to get right on the corner when you're not trying to drag paint down onto the surface. You can obviously build up a nice thick layer like I have done there. And get it to focus, and then scrape down or up and down to blend it out so you don't have a sort of smooth painted line. And then obviously you can work that through. Obviously you've just got to make sure you don't wipe the paint from the edge, because obviously you're doing this in reverse, so it's giving the effect that the white paint's worn off to reveal the metal underneath. So you need to make sure the very inside of the corner is where the grey paint is. And then obviously after you've built that up, you'll end up with something that looks a little bit like that. Now you can go in with, obviously like I've said, different silvers, and you can work this around any edge that you see fit. Obviously for me, as a comparison of the two, I did around sort of a third quite heavily around the centre, one large one on the top radius, a little bit around the pockets for the greeblies and piston, and then bottom corners alternating, obviously, so it doesn't look uniform. And as you can see, or should be able to see if I can get the camera to pick it up, I did go over after the silver had dried with rust wash and oil wash, just to give it that little bit more depth into the detailing. Okie doke. As far as I'm aware, that's it for issue 2.